Chapter 4. That morning was a painful one, with unusually scarce customers and an empty shack, which in turn meant less money in the register than Stan would have liked. Wendy switched between napping at the counter and retreating to her rooftop hideout, and Suze took the free time to sweep the shop and fix the occasional plumbing incident. Stan himself could only rotate between restocking, raising a couple prices, because hey, he had 2 more mouths to feed here, and occasionally checking up on the twins. The salesman was ready to hit his head into the nearest wall by 2 o'clock, his patience wearing thin, as he was stuck with an indecisive customer who looked very close to walking out after their game of 20 questions.
"Come on, I assure you,"
Stan insisted as he held up a small snow globe.
"This thing is virtually indestructible. Trust me, I'm an engineer."
I don't know. The tourist scratched his chin in deep thought as Stan grinned hopefully. Does it come in blue?
"Yes. Now do you want it or not?"
Stan grumbled, leaning against the counter and quickly passing the snow globe behind him to Wendy. The teen snatched it up, ducking behind the counter and breaking out a can of blue spray paint as the tourist nodded. Yeah, I'll take it.
"Great, that'll be $20.
Stan held out a waiting hand, shifting his cane to his opposite hand, and the tourist frowned. I've only got $10. Can I get a discount? Stan's grin fell, his entire businessman attitude faltering.
"You'll get the discount of my foot up your ass!"
Hastily, the customer rummaged through his wallet before pulling up a crumpled 20. Stan curled his fingers, and the tourist gladly dropped the bill into his waiting hand, as Wendy popped up from behind the counter and handed over the slightly damp blue snow globe. Have a nice day, sir. The door slammed behind the last tourist, and Stan huffed before tossing the tourist's wallet and bill onto the counter.
"I'm starting to feel too old for this shit. Stick that in the register, will ya?"
Wendy started, complying and holding the wallet up to the light, as if it were a rare specimen. Yes, the ever-famed classic wallet snatch. Feeling lazy today, boss? She opened the drawer and dropped the items inside. You didn't even try bartering. Is something on your mind?
"What? No!"
Stan snapped, waving his hand dismissively.
"I'm not thinking about those kids. They're just nuisances. Eating all my food, taking up space. I'm not worrying about them. Stop looking at me like that."
Wendy set both hands on her chin, leaning against the counter and grinning at the reddening businessman. Come on, you know you already love them, you old coot.
"All right, maybe a little."
Stan conceded in a low grumble, placing a hand on his hip as he trudged to the door.
"Look, I promised them a shopping spree, and since I'm standing here getting old today, I'm closing early and taking them, so go get your butts out of here."
You know, shopping sprees usually mean spending your moolah, Wendy reminded, holding up a bill from the drawers.
"It's just green paper?"
Stan tried, tapping his cane against the wooden floors, but it barely matched the sound of Wendy's arm slamming against the counter. Who are you, and what have you done to Stan? The red-headed gasped dramatically. That's what I thought. Seuss burst in, nearly falling off his ladder as he twisted around. He said the same thing like a day ago.
"I'm docking both your pays if you keep that up."
The aged businessman slipped a key from his pocket, moving forward to lock the door. He swore as he struggled to turn the damn thing before finally getting it locked.
"Look, those kids were scammed out of their whole childhood's worth of money, okay? Let's see. We can just say it's
priceless." Wendy looked meaningfully at Stan, all teasing vanishing from her voice. Stan avoided her gaze, flipping his eye patch back down.
Yeah, that.
Well, whatever. I get some time off. Wendy stood from her stool as Seuss paused and sweeping. Can I go too, Mr. Pons?
I don't know, Seuss.
Stan sighed as he returned the key to his pocket.
These kids are still a little jittery around you. Last thing I need is to find you getting kicked onto the floor by them or something. Yeah, well, I'm not even sure they'll be fine out in public,
Stan reminded, pointing his cane towards the handyman as he headed towards the employees-only door.
Not today, Suze. Once they actually start talking to ya, we'll reconsider. In the meantime, go,
Stan stopped in his tracks, looking around for any odd job he could conjure up.
Fix that hole in the wall.
But there's no hole in the... Seuss began before Stan suddenly smashed his fist into the nearest wall, drywall pieces crumbling to the floor in a burst of dust.
Whoops, I slipped.
Then the businessman left the room, slamming the door behind him. Oh ho, man. Sucks to be you, dude. Wendy snorted before retreating to her roof spot, her bag slung over her shoulders. Dipper hadn't felt a sense of normalcy in such a long time. He wasn't used to being able to sit with Mabel in front of the TV, clicking through channels and singing along with the theme songs, and he simply enjoyed each other's company. Hell, the last house they had been in didn't even have a TV. He hadn't planned to be so enraptured by the new episodes and shows they missed and the fun duet they shared with an old show's theme song. He hadn't planned on him and Mabel rolling around on the carpet in laughter, God forbid, touch the man's chair, just in case he was anything like before. He hadn't planned on noticing Stan's entrance when the man himself cleared his throat, standing in front of the door that led to the gift shop.
You're downstairs?
Stan stated in disbelief, tapping his cane on the wooden floorboards. Dipper jumped to his feet, clicking the TV off and grabbing Mabel's hand, pulling her behind him in a fluid motion as he edged towards the stairs. We're sorry! We didn't think... we'll ask permission next time.
Whoa, hold on there, kid.
Stan held his hand out and hurried forwards, blocking their way to the staircase.
What you think? I'm mad that you're actually getting out of that stuffy attic?
There was a stunned silence, and Mabel whimpered out from behind Dipper. Don't you want us in there?
Heck no!
Stan offered a small smile as Dipper looked on warily.
Kids, this is your home now. Check out the gift shop. Take a look around. Nothing actually bites. And the werewolf head is just something Seuss made out of newspaper and cat fur. I mean, I still don't recommend touching it, but...
Oh, well, still. Dipper guided Mabel around Stan, the twins once again glued to each other and staring with those doe eyes. We'll be out of your way, sir. We don't want to be trouble.
You're not trouble at all. Hell, you two are nothing compared to some tourists I've had to throw out of here.
Stan knelt down to the twins' height.
I'll definitely tell you guys those stories later, but listen, the day's slow and I decided to shut down the shack early and take you on that, shopping spree I promised earlier.
Really? Mabel gasped, hugging Dipper's arm as the two exchanged glances. You were serious about that?
Why wouldn't I be? I wouldn't lie about that. I mean, my wallet is as good as dead after it all, but I wouldn't lie about that.
Stan shifted his hold on his cane, noticing Dipper's cautious gaze. He looked ready to dash up the stairs and away from Stan, and the businessman moved back a few paces.
We can head out to the mall in town, and you two can pick anything you'd like. Toys, clothes, snacks even. All on me.
Dipper frowned, the offer sounding too good to be true, and he held Mabel tight, even as the girl looked up at him hopefully. Can we talk about this privately for a minute, sir?
Sure, go ahead, kid,
Stan stated, painfully standing back up to his full height. Dipper steered Mabel into the foyer and the two ducking into the kitchens and out of Stan's sight. Dipper, what's wrong? Mabel asked as her twin looked over his shoulder in the usual mix of suspicion and worriment. Stan's offering us a favor. We don't even know him yet, Mabel, Dipper sighed, his tone sounding exasperated, like this was the millionth time he had to remind her. Which, in reality, it probably was. It could be a trick. He could be taking us somewhere extremely different. I think you're being paranoid, Dip. Mabel stepped forward and grasped the boy's hands. He told me yesterday that I could trust him, that no one would ever hurt me again. Dipper frowned as Mabel avoided his gaze, staring at the ceiling in thought. You weren't there to hear him, Dipper, but he sounds different than all the other adults. He sounds sincere. Dipper grounded his heels against the wooden floorboards, yanking his hands out of Mabel's grip and grasping his sister's shoulders, bringing her closer until the two were face to face. Mabel, what did I tell you when we came? Dipper, come on! Mabel, please! Mabel shifted in her brother's hold, sighing at the desperation tinging his voice. You said not to trust any adults, okay? But Dipper, Stan's not an exception. We barely know who he is. But he hasn't laid a finger on us, Mabel insisted firmly. All the other adults were already on us by this time. But he hasn't done anything bad. He's given us food. He's let us walk around the house without consequences. He's not hurting us. I already said we can't trust anyone, Dipper growled out, peering over his shoulder again. I don't want you to get hurt. We don't know what he's capable of. You're confused. Mabel touched foreheads with her twin, and the boy let out a heaving sigh, nodding slowly. The two twins embraced, remaining in each other's holds until Mabel finally nudged Dipper's arms. Tell ya what, let's flip a coin. Mabel? Heads we go, tails we stay, alright? Mabel raised her head, catching Dipper's frown of disapproval. We'll let fate decide. Fate's never done anything good for us, Dipper harumphed. Yet he didn't shake his head. But fine. Mabel grinned, gently pulling Dipper out of the kitchen. The two carefully approached the waiting Stan in the living room, who was inspecting a bill and mumbling something about counterfeit. Sir, do you have a coin we could borrow real quick? She chirped as Stan looked up in mild surprise.
Huh? A coin? Yeah, sure.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny quarter.
Why so, kid?
We're using it to decide, Dipper stated, holding out his hand for the coin. Heads we go with you, tails we stay here. Stan reluctantly handed the coin over, and Dipper took it and glanced over at Mabel. Ready? Have at it, brosive. Mabel moved back, half hiding herself behind the boy twin. Dipper nodded, tossing the coin into the air, and the three watched as it spun over and over and over, a perfect arc before landing on the carpet. Mabel covered her mouth with her hands to hide her thrilled smile as the coin landed heads up. Stan had very well received the message of distrust from Dipper, with how the boy usually glared in his direction and latched onto Mabel a lot more than usual around him, which in turn made Mabel more wary. The seasoned businessman had expected more of an excited response with his shopping spree announcement. But maybe these kids had never had a shopping spree before in their lives, which would explain their blank stares they had cast his way earlier. Stan didn't like to think that was the case. It just made him angrier at the countless cold-hearted bastards who kept these kids in their terror before and thought they were treating them right. That hole he punched in the wall back at the shack was only a small stress reliever, and he would do so much more to their so-called father. Despite Dipper remaining quiet and distant in the back seat of the car, Mabel was swinging her feet and actually smiling at Stan through the mirror. The girl twin still shied away from the businessman if he came too close, but he was pleasantly surprised by her rising trust, which wasn't the case for her brother. Stan drove as slow as possible, something he normally didn't do, and it took an immense amount of difficulty, and he pulled into the parking lot of the Gravity Falls Mall.
Alright kids, here we are,
he announced, shutting the car down and turning in his seat.
Now, I'm happy to let you run around on your own, but just be careful, alright? I don't fancy the thought of seeing the two of ya on the back of a milk carton.
On our own? Dipper echoed, and Mabel automatically reached out, the boy responding by latching onto her hand.
Well, do you want me with ya?
Stan asked uneasily. Last he checked, there were many signs with his faces crossed out on multiple stores. No, it's alright, Dipper assured hastily, unlatching his seatbelt as Mabel did the same. We'll be fine on our own.
Good. Alright, I mean, I'll definitely be near the stores, but I won't be breathing down your necks,
Stan informed as he exited the cars, too.
God forbid some sick bastards try taking off with my kids. Or if their father somehow makes an appearance and wants to get his kids back. Yikes.
Stan shivered at the thought, bracing himself against the car as Dipper and Mabel hopped out. He almost wanted to shoo them back in and back to the shack in safety, but they needed social interaction, frankly. Even now, he could see them shivering, staring up at the big and unfamiliar building that held people that he was sure they wouldn't trust.
Come on, it'll be fine,
Stan assured, holding out his hand. Tentatively, Mabel tucked her hand in, and the three walked into the mall side by side. Stan led them towards a clothing shop he knew sold clothing for these kids' ages, and that he was still allowed into, naturally. The mall wasn't extremely busy, but he still had to push past people, grumbling angrily at the stubborn ones he bumped shoulders into.
Watch it, will ya?
He snapped at some woman who nearly crashed into Dipper with a baby stroller. Once they reached the shop, Stan directed them about where they were free to go.
You can grab anything you'd like, unless it's over $50. Then let me know, so I can apply a discount,
Stan informed, coughing awkwardly as he untangled his fingers from Mabel's.
Will you two be fine?
We'll be fine, Dipper nodded as Mabel beamed at the huge selection of clothing all around them. There weren't too many people milling about the store, and she felt much safer here than out in the crowd.
Alright, I'll be over there,
Stan pointed to the jewelry store next door.
Just yell if you need me.
And with that, he left the doorway, and Dipper confidently strode through until Mabel yanked him and made a beeline for the rack of pretty shirts. Dipper, look at this! Mabel thrust a pink top absolutely covered in sequins, and Dipper smiled as he nodded in acceptance. The female twin let out a noise between a squeal and a yell, and dropped it in Dipper's arms before hurrying to another shirt that caught her eye. Dipper knew his sister was a huge fan of glittery and sparkly and embellished designs. He often used to steal small jars of glitter or stick-on gems from stores whenever he could, allowing Mabel to decorate their meager belongings. It made her extremely happy, and in turn made him happy. The only reason she didn't have their current things bedazzled was due to Dipper's inability to grab materials in time. He would have probably fought tooth and nail to stay back at the shack, in the safety and seclusion of the attic, but that coin made the decision, and Mabel, despite Dipper's attempts to calm her, was still majorly excited. He was content with Mabel running around the store, so long as she stayed within sight and didn't interact with any adults, per Dipper's request. And to see her so incredibly happy made a little pleasure they were here. The only worry he had was Stan using these things to make them do whatever he wanted, which was why Dipper was going to look for nooks and crannies to hide their things in when they got home. He had already succeeded in hiding the toiletries and bears in the attic. Mabel disappeared around the corner of a rack of clothes, and Dipper hurried to meet her, lugging along a small carry basket that was already filled to the brim within the 10 minutes that they were there, and were soon going to be tried on, once Mabel had fit every clothing item she could. Much to Dipper's chagrin, the weight of the basket was too much for his emaciated self and limited strength, and he tumbled to the floor, clothes littering the rug as the basket flipped to its side.
Ah, shit! Mabel, wait!
Mabel shifted the clothes on the rack in hasty excitement, having the time of her life. She lifted her head and grinned at a really pretty and glittery blue dress that caught her eye, Dipper becoming the least of her worries. She zigzagged around racks before finally reaching it, closing her hands on the fabric. At the same time, another hand latched on, and Mabel jumped back. Surprisingly, there was another girl, possibly her age. The stranger's face caked with makeup and a haughty atmosphere, practically radiating from her form. The female twin let out a squeak of surprise, pulling her hand back as the girl blew a bubble with her gum and yanked the dress from the rack.
Who or what are you?
The blonde sneered, studying Mabel with a face that looked like she had smelled something foul. Mabel felt the shivers begin, an automatic response when it came to unfamiliar people. Despite the trembles racking her body, Mabel forced a grin. Hi, I'm new here, actually. She felt her exuberant mood deflate as the girl huffed.
Well, I'm Pacifica, she informed. Welcome to Gravity Falls, I guess.
Mabel nodded, her mouth feeling dry as she remembered Dipper's constant advice before they entered a new school. Just calm down, focus, introduce yourself, just be Mabel, you will be fine.
I'm Mabel!
The twin held out her hand, but Pacifica only stared at it, and Mabel hesitantly returned it to her side. I have a twin brother named Dipper too.
Did your family just move here or something? Because I've never heard of you, Pacifica snorted. And it's hard for that to happen here.
Well, I don't really have a family. I arrived here yesterday, Mabel slipped out before snapping her mouth shut. Even then, Pacifica still studied the girl's dingy sweatshirt and tattered skirt before throwing her head back and laughing.
Did you drag yourself out of the trash?
She scoffed, moving back a few paces from the girl.
Not only do you look like you're wearing dirty trash chic, but you reek. Are you some orphan or something?
Mabel jumped, stunned, her confidence fading as she looked down at her clothes. Remaining silent, she ducked her head and avoided the blonde girl's gaze. There was a stretch of silence before Pacifica gasped.
Wait, are you?
Her eyes widened as she slapped a hand over her mouth.
Oh my god! You're an orphan in Gravity Falls! I have got to spread this! Oh my gosh!
I'm a foster child, technically, Mabel shot back, beginning to hide herself within the rack of clothes behind her in an attempt to disappear.
I can't help it. Your parents didn't even want you, and you're just bouncing around?
Pacifica tossed her hair over her shoulders.
Wow! Even my parents at least want to keep me.
At least you've got a family, Mabel muttered, hanging her head. My ma's dead. Pacifica hummed, but turned her head as if she slightly regretted her last statement. She held up the glittery dress before glancing at Mabel. Were you actually planning on trying this on? The thing would slide right off you. It's worth a shot, Mabel tried weakly, but the blonde was already beginning to walk away.
Whatever. You probably couldn't afford it anyway.
Mabel stared after the girl, sinking farther into the clothes and covering her face in her hands. Were all town folks like this? She never remembered anyone reacting so badly to her being an orphan. Of course, no one really asked, and her dingy clothing and appearance weren't a norm at school. School was a safe haven, and the only time her and Dipper got to wear decent clothes and wash up, to avoid suspicion from teachers and other students. But of course, school had ended a while ago for her and Dipper, and she didn't remember the last time she had grabbed something new to wear besides today. Dipper appeared then, dragging the basket behind him. Hey, I was calling you! This stupid thing fell and... He instantly dropped the basket, noticing his sister's state. Without a word, he set the thing down and pulled her towards him. The two embraced in a hug. Who did what? Dipper snarled fiercely, feeling Mabel's shivers that rolled throughout her body. It's nothing, Dipper. Mabel tried, but Dipper scoffed, and the female twin buried her head in his shoulder. Alright. Some girl. I ran into a townfolk, Dipper, and she hated me. I already told you, Mabel. Deadbeats are bitter towards people with sparkly personalities, Dipper huffed. No, it wasn't about me, Mabel sniffed. It was my clothes, us, being orphans. Dipper fell silent, feeling anger flare up, and he tensed up, his vision blurring as yellow began to tint every object in his view. Mabel felt her twin stiffen, and she tightened her hold on him. No, Dipper! Don't do that! It's fine! I'm okay! No one has a right to make fun of you for that, Mabel, Dipper growled, but compliant, calming himself down and allowing his vision to return to normal. It's not right! But it's true, Mabel whispered. Hell no! Nothing's wrong with us, and you can't help it! He turned his head, wishing he could be throwing punches, but knew Mabel would disapprove. Did disapprove, just by her body language. This is why I don't like you trusting people immediately. I didn't approach her. She stole a dress I liked. And it went downhill from there, Mabel confessed with a dejected sigh. Well, Dipper moved back, slipping his hands down to hers, and their hands latched on as Dipper forced down his anger. Mabel would rebound from this. She often did, since insults and the like became something the twins could let roll off their backs. You know what? Let's try these things on and become 10 times better than that stupid dress. Mabel giggled, tapping foreheads with Dipper. Thanks, Dipper. Don't mention it. Now come on, I'm supposed to be your judge here. You can't keep me away then. Mabel perked up, smiling broadly as she snatched up the basket, and the two headed straight for the dressing rooms. Stan was back within the clothing shop in time to see Mabel and Dipper heading for the register. He hurried over to their side, checking them over from afar and only seeing them happily chatting to one another, a basket full of clothes in Dipper's hand. Stan was back within the clothing shop in time to see Mabel and Dipper heading for the register. He hurried over to their side, checking them over from afar and only seeing them happily chatting to one another, a basket full of clothes in Dipper's arms.
You got what you wanted, kids?
Stan inquired as he walked up, Mabel instinctively ducking behind Dipper. Yeah, Mabel was very enthusiastic, sir, Dipper responded, smiling back at his sister. I mean, if you want us to put some back, we can.
Nah, kid, this is perfectly fine. Less than I thought, even,
Stan stated as he grabbed the basket from Dipper's hold.
Here, I'll go ahead and pay for it. You kids can wait outside. Stay near the doorway where I can see you.
The twins complied, hand in hand as they walked out of the shop. They sat on the bench, Mabel wrapping her arms around Dipper, and the boy doing the same as the townfolks passed by in front of them, paying hardly any mind. Are all these townfolks rude, or was I just unlucky? Mabel sighed, and Dipper snorted in derision. Unlucky, Mabel. Whoever said that to you is a shitty person. Alright? But, Dipper, she was kinda right. Don't you even! The boy's tone was tinged with fiery anger, but he held a small smile on his face. You and I can't help our appearance. And with these new clothes and the new things Stan got for us, we can fix ourselves up to our heart's content. Okay? Mabel contemplated before returning the smile and putting her hand over her heart. Awesome! Dipper reached into his pocket, removing the quarter from earlier, and turning to the little machine next to them. He gently placed it in the slot and turned the crank, hearing the machine sputter and creak. Ooh! Me! Mabel reached over, lifting the flap and letting the small plastic container roll out onto her hands. Oh, cool! A pink lid! My favorite! She giggled, cracking it open and removing a sticky hand. Look, Dipper! It's also pink! How cool is that? Dipper chuckled as Mabel slapped him with the toy. Well, it is a lucky quarter.
Try and catch me, scrubs!
Out of nowhere, Stan erupted from the clothing store, a huge stash of bags filled with clothes hanging from his arms. He grabbed the twins' hands and raced out of the store. Workers from both the jewelry and the clothing shop yelling and chasing after them. End of Chapter 4.